Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Nous sommes ravis de vous accueillir. Je vais vous inviter à vous...
I'm going to ask you to take a seat, please. We're delighted to have you here today. Please take your seats. Please take your seats so we can get started. So, ladies and gentlemen, hello. I'm delighted to find you here today, this year, for the INCYBER forum, which this year is going to be a very rich session. I'm here with Guy, who has organized this session, and he's going to bring together a whole community of people for the next 2 days. So, dear Guy, can we launch this fifth session and talk maybe about this anniversary in particular? Thank you, Melanie. Thank you also, and welcome to all of you for this 2024 edition of the ID&KYC Forum. So welcome, and we have several dates to commemorate together. We have a 50-year anniversary, another that's a 10-year anniversary, and a third of 100 years. So we're going to start with the oldest. I'm sorry, 1 year. The oldest is 50 years, and that is the discovery of public encryption, discovery of public encryption. So it's the asymmetrical, it's Feitian who discovered this form of asymmetric encryption. And so this is the foundation of modern IT identification, because it's a sort of pair of private and public keys that certificates associated with a security certificate, which allows digital signatures and also allows each entity to have a unique digital identity. So to each identity, we can give one or more certificates. And I would say that this is the anniversary of the sort of birth of digital identity, which operationally sort of rolled out in the 1980s with digital certification as we now know it today. Notably, the X509 certification, which was used in telecom initially, and was started in 1988. So the second anniversary is one you all know. Do you remember what happened 10 years ago? Does everybody remember? The EIDAS rules or regulations. It's 2014, the EIDAS regulations 10 years ago. And what better way to commemorate it than with its successor, its new regulation, the Unified Framework for Europe, the European Unified Identification Framework. This is what we're going to talk about over the next 2 days. And just personally, I wanted to tell you that I remember the meetings that we had in Brussels at the time. And I remember that both the digital trust services, I would say, was the broadening of the 1999 directive on electronic identification. It was a totally new concept, and there was a real question on whether the European Council and the European Parliament were going to accept these proposals or not. And the final anniversary, which is more modestly, it's the fifth. It's the fifth anniversary, the fifth year, the fifth edition of our ID&KYC event, and so it's the fifth year that we're proposing this forum, and so it's an important anniversary for us. We're going to celebrate that with the next 2 days with these conferences, and also tonight you're all invited for a convivial moment together at the cocktails between 5 and 7 p.m. at the exterior of this conference room. just outside this conference room. So Guy, you talked about these anniversaries and these regulations and technology. It's really at the heart of the subjects that we're going to talk about today. But we all know here that one thing that's absolutely key to all of this is the human factor, and that is the theme that you proposed for this year. Why do you want to focus on the human dimension? Why do you want to focus on the human dimension, and what does that signify for you over these last 5 years and 5 years to come? Yes, Melanie, when we thought about a theme for this year, we said to ourselves that what groups together all the motivations of the different actors of the KYC and of digital identification is to be able to accompany the human being throughout all of these technological transformations and mutations. And how do we accompany this? How does it, we don't accompany the customers, just allow us to accompany customers but also it allows us to personalize the experience for all people, to have a more transparent experience, to better understand the needs and preferences of people and provide better added value to companies. And it's also a way to accompany the users through the technological innovations, through cybersecurity, through AI, and to improve the efficiency and efficacy of their actions, and to also, once again, give them a more fluid experience. It's a way to also protect them, protect citizens, and this protection also goes through the fight against illicit content, but also by protecting minors from offensive content, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And we can also select the attributes or characteristics to give more choices for digital services and for information and data that people want to share. And this throughout the citizenship, and this goes through the digital identification portfolios that we'll talk about later. You talked about the fluidity, the optimization, the security, the accompaniment of the customer, the consumer, the citizen. So it's a little bit all those things that we're going to talk about over the next 2 days in France, but also in Europe, because there's a lot of current events around these themes. So how are we going to look at these big themes over the next 2 days? What are the big themes you've prepared for these 2 days? Yes, thank you, Melanie. We're going to be able to look at a number of subjects that I think are very interesting for these 2 days. The first subject is to give a sort of like overview of the digital environment here in Europe, and Philippe Laton, the European deputy, is going to come join us in a minute. Also defends digital security throughout Europe. It's very dear to his heart as a mission, and when you also look at the sort of pioneering efforts of digital security in Europe and all the work he's done to sort of like raise awareness on this subject, Pierre Chassinet is also going to join us for the Buy Connect initiative, which is a very ambitious initiative, very promising for digital identification for the French community. And then ACNIL, Bertrand Parier is going to also join us to talk about all the information that was gathered last year and how all of this is involved in digital identification in France and in Europe in general. So these are very important subjects, and we're going to also have 2 roundtables on the questions for the digital identification portfolios. The first on the European portfolio, and we'll see the usages that are being developed by these ID portfolios, and also we're going to talk about the European pilot projects and the lessons that we can draw from them, and the architectural options and functions of these ID portfolios, and how they are rolled out in terms of security, high-level security, etc. How do we combine all these different elements together? And then this afternoon, we will have another roundtable on the electronic portfolio, this more in terms of what is the strategy for intermediation with electronic portfolios, whether it's for identification, but also for payment, for digital currencies. What will be the role for these portfolios wallets that can be used. Of course, most of the transactions in Europe are now through mobile applications. And so what are the strategies that companies need to put in place to look at all these sort of wallets that are being developed? So I want to thank all the participants. And then we're also going to talk about this afternoon, we're going to talk about, with a very important roundtable, on the 2 structural regulations in FIER for Europe, the new regulation on the European digital identification and framework, and also the anti-money laundering regulators. And we're going to talk about the initiators and the developers of these texts, notably the European Commission. We're going to have the DG Connect with Sabine Otto, and I thank her for her presence. And we're also going to have the DJ FISMA for AML regulations with Madame Rulaka Prona, who I thank also for her presence. And we're also going to have Stefan Wieck, who's going to talk about, as a former director of a bank, he's going to also talk as a consultant, very much invested in this question of these European texts, and he's going to give his testimonials on these subjects, on payments and the synergies between anti-money laundering effects and digital identification. So that's for today. If you just allow me to say a word about tomorrow, because we also have a very interesting program for tomorrow. We're going to start at 9:30 tomorrow with a presentation by Eric Salobir, who is the president of Human Technology Foundation. And the theme will be how digital identification can improve the daily lives of people. And then we will have a roundtable on the digital pathways through KYC and artificial intelligence, AI, how AI can, whether it's generative AI or productive AI, how it can be used, how to use it, and what is the impact on the customer relationship, on the knowledge we have of our customers, and on the pathways of going forward. We'll have 2 banks that are going to give testimonials, Une Bank and also Bourso Bank, or Boursorama as some people know it. We'll also have the French Committee for Banking Normalization, and also the Archipel Company, which is going to participate in this wonderful roundtable. Next, there will be a subject on which I personally invite you to learn about. We'll have a dialogue, a testimonial with Raphael Gauvin, who is a former deputy, who's a lawyer, an attorney, on the extraterritorial impacts of digital technologies. This is something that's more and more important because since 2016, we have the American law with the criteria of attachment, notably the hosting of data, citizenship, currencies, and then we also have other countries like Estonia, which use digital identification to create economic citizens. And so there's a lot of questions that are being raised in terms of practices beyond national territory, so extraterritorial law. And so the question is whether France, which usually had a very defensive posture for all of this, so we're going to talk about these defensive postures, but are we capable to take more offensive postures on these themes? And so what are the questions that are being raised in terms of data and digital identification through these new questions? So it's a whole new debate. It's a relatively new debate. And so I invite you to attend. We're also going to talk about digital fraud, identity theft, cyber fraud, cyber theft. We're also going, this is a very vast subject and constantly going through changes. And so I thank Europol to participate in that roundtable. I also thank France Connect to have accepted to give their testimonials on how they attack fraud and how they can overcome this question of digital fraud or cyber fraud. And we'll also have participation from Norway, John Erik Sersas, which I thank, has a great deal of knowledge and experience on digital identification and cyber theft and cyber fraud. So this afternoon we'll have a roundtable with the Trust and Safety Forum, which is another associated forum on the question of the responsibility of digital platforms and also answers to illicit content and the protection of minors. Here too, it's an area that's very important with 3 dimensions that will be addressed by this roundtable. The first is to remember the challenges of this problem. They're colossal challenges, and the stakes are colossal. Today, we have 60% of children between 11 or 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old, that are exposed to pornography. And there's a real problem with regard to this, and we're not even talking about people who are 15 or 16 years old. We're talking about really young kids, pre-adolescents. And so it's important to expose this problem and to remember that even in DSA, for example, among the 20 platforms that are being controlled by their millions or billions of platforms, there are 3 adult platforms, which is not nothing. And we're going to first expose the problem, and then we're going to look at the solutions that are being brought to the fore in terms of legislation, the SREN in France, the DSA for Europe, the Safety Online in the UK. But we'll also look at the practices of implementing of the sort of authorities and governing bodies. We have the DKD in France, in the Netherlands, which will also give a testimonial. They have a very specific form of action here in Europe, and I think it'd be very interesting to see what they do. And then the third section will be how companies are starting to develop in this new market. In the Anglo-Saxon terms, we call it age gating. It's a gate to keep, so it's very to verify the age, to verify that the parents consent when minors are looking at things, that there's parental consent. So there's millions of transactions that have to be verified in a few seconds. You have to identify the identity, not completely like you might do with KYC, but these are new practices, and so we'll have 2 companies that are going to come talk to us about how they address this market. And a final word on that at the end of the tomorrow afternoon, we'll have a roundtable on the CAM with 3 main players: Benoit Fuseau, who's president of Inclusif, Cyril Collin, who is the director responsible for Pascal Louis for Whipstone, and they're going to talk about something very interesting, because we're going to talk about the questions related to KYC, of compliance, notably customer consent, and also questions of marketing and cybersecurity. And we have a whole range of things related to digital identification of customers, harmonization with employees, and putting all of this together in a consistent manner. And so this is a whole segment that's really coming together on the side of KYC and digital identification in general. So I'm finished for now, but yes, Guy, you really promised us a very rich program, and we can really see that with the different subjects that you've just sort of like briefly presented to us now, with digital identification, with the notion of payments and the personal digital IDs, and also for professional aspects, and we can see how things are evolving. So we're gonna come back to that in a few minutes with our guests who are going to take the stage in a few minutes. But do you want to say if anything else to our participants, or talk about the cocktail this evening or anything? Yes, just 2 things very quickly. Just want to talk about Senator Marc-Philippe Daubresse, who should have been here today and would have done this opening much better than I did, but unfortunately he had to be hospitalized today. And so he's a person who's very, very wonderful person. He's a very attaching, a very charming person. He's very much involved in digital identification issues, but unfortunately he wasn't able to be here today for health reasons. And a second thing, because I talked about the cocktail to which you are all invited, but I just wanted to add that this is the KYC Forum cocktail, which is something that is going to be talked with the Security Alliance, the SCA. I would like to thank them in your name, but obviously, and also to thank the Secretary General, Jean-Claude Berin, who will be there to greet you at the cocktail this evening. So thank you for attending there. Have a great day. And so we'll see you very, very soon. Thank you, Guy, for bringing that whole community together for these next 2 days. And so we're going to ask our first guests to come up to the stage and talk about the first 5 years of digital identity and KYC. And we're going to look at the outlook for the future, because there's a lot of things that we need to look at for the future. So thank you, Guy, for your words. Thank you. I think we can applaud you. Thank you very much.
Et quant à moi, j'ai le plaisir de rester avec vous et d'accueillir.
No. So, 4 guests I'm going to invite to join me on stage to start the 5th year of ID&KYC Forum. So, Bertrand Payès as well, Candice, Doge, Philippe Latombe, please join me on stage to open this sequence of ID&KYC Forum. So, we're going to come back on a number of points mentioned by Guy when opening this session. For some of you, we have seen one another, seen each other for the past 5 years, and we've seen a number of significant breakthroughs that we were able to share with our audience, and there is still a great audience this year again, and we to see how it has evolved and probably project and see what are the next steps with a number of use cases, regulations, ambitious projects, as Guy mentioned. Just as a reminder for our guest Pierre Chassigneux, who is leading the B-Connect project. Thank you for being with us. You were here last year. You presented that initiative, and we can see that things are moving. Candice Doche with us today as well. Thank you for being so loyal. You are the director of the digital identity with La Poste. Bertrand Payès, next to you, director of technology and innovation at CNIL. And we have the pleasure of having Philippe Latombe, who's an MP member, French MP member, who's with us, and to have come all this way and arrive on time in spite of all circumstances. We'll start with you, Candice, maybe, if maybe come back on the use cases, the new users. Well, we've just passed the mark of 5 million users. And we can see that the first year we were here to talk about it, it's making progress. Thank you, Melanie. Well, yes, actually, we have just passed the mark of 5 million of digital identity. Well, 2 years ago, it was 0.1% of France Connect connections. Now we just passed the 10% mark. So we can see it is being rolled out and deploying among the general public. It's not doing it on its own. It's not through communication or goodwill. It is through use, which has scaled and developed. First is the CPF, the training account. If you're French, you probably all heard about that. There were enormous fraud through phishing or a phone fraud. One of the ways to stop that, or at least limit it, one of the methods was to install France Connect Plus upon request to the request for training. So you have the La Poste digital identity. We have other players who will come, France Identité, within a few weeks now. And it has allowed first to secure the approach and also to develop this hygiene of secure identity and explain that it's important. So Connect Plus was really a first step, and we saw in a public transformation a number of uses that were going to be developed, especially any public proceedings, when there is a payment, and this has been secured with a strong attestation, but you could change the bank details on your on the taxis. You could access public financing just with a login and a password. So it was important to secure that. So INPI is the single point of contact for companies to modify a company, or Ma Prime Rénov, which is a renovation bonus. We just joined France Connect, and so it's going to be boosted and it's going to develop with the arrival of France Identité within a few weeks, and Iris, which should come later to have a wide choice of players in France Connect Plus. So we can see, yes, there are a number of players with the arrival of new uses that may appoint. So Philippe, we talked about France. So we mentioned Guy mentioned a number of countries. Some are represented here in this forum, and very often we mentioned during the first years, we always mentioned Estonia as this appropriation of digital identity. Now, many European countries have made progress. We're saying that France is lagging behind. We can see we're making progress. Could we have an update of where France is positioned in this landscape of digital identity? Well, first of all, hello everyone, and to answer your question, France was late and it's catching up very clearly. Actually, there were some countries that were harbingers. We were mentioning Estonia, they started from scratch. It was that easy, while we had fragmentation of identity in France that made it more complicated. And the onset of new technology and the pressure of fraud has made it that there was a desire from the public authorities to secure and therefore develop a system for the state and publicity. We can see the acceleration of advertising for France Connect and other solutions for strong identification. Banks, the private sector had started earlier, as you said. The banks have started that. Notaries were ahead of that because they could have like proxy at a distance, signing at a distance, remote signing. So all this is being harmonized, going in the same direction and catching up. Now, the true question is more of a perspective. Is now, once you've got all this European system, the question is, shouldn't we have a single European system? And then we are faced with two things. The first one is technically, what is the technical solution that's going to be for all? And something that really has an impact for us is that the identity is a regalian authority, and if you delegate it to European relegation or supranational European authority, it is not in the specification of the French public. Is that we can see with CPF and a new technology with the AI and so on, digital identity is the most important criterion because it's going to protect everyone. So we want something that is the most consistent possible, because it's going to go from one country to the next. So it would be logical that we have a European identity. That's what that's IS2's ambition, which has a number of it raises a question of philosophy, because they see the beginning of a surveillance of our citizens, and then if it's connected to financial transactions or medical file, we could have a follow-up of our citizens. We may raise an issue, so it's probably going to be the subject of the beginning of the new mandate of European MPs. So this regulation was underlined. It's going to be the object of a number of debates over these 2 days. Not only Europe likes regulating, but it's also necessary to promote the emergence of this usage. And there's also the question of interoperability of the various systems and then the regalian aspect is that we are starting to see a field of possibilities at European level, so the door is not closed. So could we have an update, Philippe, about these various regulations that sometime that are, we think about same, there's NICE 2, IDAS 2, so how can all this be articulated? I will not speak on behalf of my neighbor who's representing CNIL, but GDPR is the foundation regulation because you have to, it's an obligation, it's the most important. And then we have difficulties, we can see with the debates that we have on the SREN law, where not everyone, but the majority of my colleagues want to remove anonymous connection on networks, and then checking identity before registering onto social media. And if you don't have containerized digital identity where you can choose what you put, what you give or not to third parties, I don't see how we can do it. Now, this is something that comes back regularly. We have some unfortunately, some things arrived. The IDAS 3 is coming soon, IDAS 2. It's sort of in between the older version of digital identity and the one we are going to, which is containerized, where we can decide where we want to transfer or not some information to another person, so we can have some interoperability. And then it's also so what is the system that's going to be selected? The wallet, for example, is that the technology we should keep? What is this situation, and do we master that? So we can see that we have different visions in Europe of these aspects between the Dutch and the Germans, who don't see any questions in using American technology. France, who sees that as an issue, especially with the Minister of the Interior is one of the most closed on that. They were really on premises for this, and so they're not really used to opening up to foreign technology. So it's not in they're ahead of us in the year 2024 for the implementation, and probably in 25 we cannot do without in the cyberspace. So some debates we'll come back to, and then for sovereignty we'll just come back to this within 1 second. Maybe I'll see with Bertrand. I know that we'll have a lot of things to say. Pierre, sovereignty is also important for CNIL, but so Philippe was talking about it, of what is happening, this protection, this digital identity that reinforces it all. Last year you had presented some work of CNIL on digital identity. What have been the progress since then? It's and then with the rolling out that we talked about, that is speeding up, whether it's the La Poste or France d'identité numérique. What we said in this report a year ago, and what we've been saying since the beginning, and then since GDPR has been applying, so we shouldn't have a monolithic vision of digital identity. So whether it's video gaming going to a swimming pool, school associations, or applying for IDs, for example, if they will not reveal the same information, and we have to find, we should have this, the attributes of identity in this. What the risk we see is that streamlining of requiring a regalian, very secure identity to create a library card, for example, which is not a major security breach. Then the second aspect is security, with practices today that are more and more digital on a large scale, but where the infrastructure of identity management is not completely ready, or has only been recently ready, and a topic that people are sending each other basically photocopies of ID cards, including for exercising their rights with a GDPR. And at curite, we think there is a solution that is based on cryptography. We love cryptography. It is technology that allows, thanks to mathematics, to prove things without revealing information. And this is what we expect from the wallet and from the French initiatives, is to get to a point where you can prove residence, an age, or an identity to respect one of the GDPR cardinal principles, which is anonymous, being anonymous. We're not far from it, but we are under fire on a number of initiatives for regarding identity, checking of age, and the technical work around the wallet and the reference architecture. So it is a stimulating aspect, and we hope that within 2 or 3 years we'll have this infrastructure to protect privacy. Has your position on biometry evolved since last year? Well, it has not evolved since last year, no. So biometry, or biometrics, remains for us a piece of data that is specific, protected in a specific way in Article 9 of GDPR, because it is unrevocable. If it's compromised, you cannot do anything about it. You can't change your face or your fingerprints. It's not a number of like on your ID where you can replace it. So we have to be very, very careful about it. We can see that there are some wider public use on smartphones, for example, and we remain a vision that said at a maximum, use it under the control of the person present, so the person can decide where biometrics is going to be included. Is it when I sign something, when I cross a border, and to avoid, of course, making up large databases, because we know that more there are databases that uses biometrics, the more it will be interesting for an attacker to compromise this and then endanger the life of people. So Pierre, we understood the sovereignty. I saw you with Candice. You noted a number of points presented by Philippe. I know that this topic of sovereignty is at the heart of this BeConnect project, and you want to accompany, be complementary with France Connect and the existing ecosystem. Can we have an update on BeConnect? Last year we were experimenting. Now things have evolved a lot. And maybe have an update for those who followed us, those who have joined us this year to understand BeConnect. Thank you, Melanie. Last year I talked about BeConnect. It was an initiative led by the major French banks, and it is my pleasure to announce that following this experimentation that was very positive, the major French banks, 5 of them, BNP Paribas, BPCE, Crédit Agricole, LCL, Crédit Mutuel Group, Société Générale, have decided to create a company that is specific and dedicated to launching the offer of service, BeConnect offer service, which will be launched this autumn with the ambition of reaching millions of people, because the force of BeConnect is in the fact that the idea we had to develop BeConnect relies on what we've been doing for payments by card. For the past 5 years, we are identified by the bank as part of bank card payments, whatever the nature of the bank card. This enormous infrastructure authentication exists. It is SP2 compliant. Why not reuse this infrastructure for authentication, not to secure checkout, the payment, but to secure the check-in, login, and creation of the account, the sign-up, and so on. So the idea is very simple. We're going to reuse an enormous authentication infrastructure to rely on the assets of the SP2, and especially the APIs. You've probably heard of open banking APIs, where we rely on the open banking APIs, and we are in the logic of reusing the infrastructure to entering into contact. So there's no KYC to implement. We are just activating an account, a BConnect account. So in the autumn, your banks will be offering you from your online banking app an offer of activation of your BConnect account. All you have to do is click on it, and within 3 or 4 clicks, you would have activated your BConnect account. So the ambition is to have 40 million French people who could activate very simply with the online banking app for this BConnect account. And then from there, you could do what we offer you to do today, including social login, Google Connect, Facebook login, and so on. So solutions that we use to avoid this login and password in terms of buying journey, but also in terms of security. So the idea is that next to Franks Connect, to offer a solution that is driven by the bank community of 5 major grand groups to secure the contact. And this is central. And this is why we have a dimension of sovereignty, because sovereignty is also securing our connection on all e-commerce banking sites. We don't want to be in the public sector. That's the domain, the regalian of France Connect, but we ambition to provide the mass market solution. We're targeting 1 billion transactions. We are talking over time of billions of transactions. Our Swedish friends, the equivalent of BConnect, it was slightly different, but Bank ID is 8 billion transactions for 10 million residents. So that's reality of Bank ID. So we have this ambition to offer service for mass markets. So how will you interconnect with France Connect, or you complement each other? We don't interconnect with France Connect. We on the private sector sites, websites, you will have login and password, the Google button, the Apple button, the Facebook button, and you will have soon the BConnect button that will allow you securely to log in, authenticate yourself. And we have a service that is specific, is that from the moment that this service of authentication by BConnect is driven by the bank community. I'll take an example. You're on an e-commerce website and you decide to make a purchase. So you will need to access your account, and then you'll be able to access that in 1 click through BConnect. That's very important because we have an AI engine that's high performance that allows you within 1 click in 80% of the cases to access your account without any actions. And if you pay by card, the bank will know that you will have got into your customer account through BConnect, and therefore the likeliness of being re-authenticated by payment by card will probably be lower than where it is today. So you make it more of a free-flowing customer journey. So I think the true what's at stake here it's how free-flowing the journey is. If you put security without free flow, it doesn't work. We have to mix security with seamlessness, and this is our ambition that we want to solve with BConnect. Thank you, Pierre. And of course, we'll say a word about Europe, of course, but Candice may be on this aspect as well, this finance in the banking aspect. You've developed a number of uses with La Poste Bank, La Banque Postale. Well, upstream from the connection of BConnect, this KYC, of course, the bank has always had digital solutions to check identity. And 2 things have changed for us on this checking the ID. First is the arrival of PayVid reference, the proof of La Poste had the certification last year, so the traditional banks are transforming their journeys to let the opportunity of users to create 100% online accounts without having to go to a bank branch. And then the digital ID of La Poste. I mean, if you had a prospect or customer of the bank was rather limited. Now today, maybe 10% of connection to France Connect, so you're more likely to find a user of ID. So it is developing. La Banque Postale is using our services to, again, to creating accounts that are 100% online. It is 50% of transformation rate over scanning documents or face recognition. So a better transformation and a better seamless journey. All you have to code to enter, and then you can get your information already identified. It is developing. It is slower in the banking than it is for the public sector. Can we have an update as well about digital ID with professional attributes? Because we had an update last year, and once again, it's making progress slowly, probably not as fast as we want it to be, but well, as Bertrand said earlier, you can see it within 2 to 3 years, and it so allows us to adapt to the evolution of the market of several sectors. For professional ID, we are mature. For private individuals and professionals, it's an attribute based on physical people, and we are working on experts in the sector to attribute the attribute of I'm representing a company, the attribute of the temp worker, of the workers. We are working with Digipost. We have 10 million safe box representing a French company. So we'll be able now to develop sectoral entities. So both professional and bits of identity that are going to represent me as, for example, a wage earner from the Capost. So Bertrand, a word about the health data, because we are at the core of the news. What's the latest news of this digital ID to protect the health data? Well, of course, this is a hot topic. At CNIL, we've had with partition the various spheres, and so there is a question of how can we join these various initiatives. That was the point of our presentation last year, to see this continue to be the regarding identity, the carte vitale in France, and the electronic one will be on your phone, and even the passe sanitaire, the health pass, which was during the COVID pandemics. There was and it was a vaccination book, and in the context that wasn't really secure at first, but allowing us to test the issues of user-friendliness. So we can see that we can see a growing interest in digitalizing health systems. We had this year several breaches and leaks of data, and it's not the fault of identification of users, but it is, on the contrary, the securing of authentication of certain agents and professionals. So I think that from that point of view, it comforts us in the idea that we have to continue securing the authentication of professionals in hospitals or in clinics. There is a roadmap of the health data that plans by early 26 the two-factor identity checking in all situations, and this the issue of dematérialisation and how can their wallet systems allow to welcome, to host the management of my health card or other types of information like the company health system. So it will be welcome to allow and avoid these future breaches of data. Now, maybe Philippe, the vision of the MP member on these hot topics of securing health data. You've seen, Bertrand, we've seen a number of leaks and breaches, in any case, to health data, including for the French people. We could see that this data is the interest of hackers and also the hosting of health data? Well, several things. We're in a context, as we said, where digital identity is very important because everything is being digitalized, so leaks are possible. So generally speaking, it's some cyber attacks, and sometimes there are mistakes made, but these leaks are very significant because they make the citizens, they bring fear to our citizens, and we need to create trust. So the more leaks we have with health data for our citizens is a violation of their health status and their very being, so they don't like it. And we've seen that with the comparative health insurance. I'm not even talking about the one where France Travail, it was different sphere, but also an intimate type, or different intensity, but also intimate type of information. So it is our role as MP members to tell the states to see how in the regulation can we include limitations. Well, the law cannot do everything. So for health data, so how do you archive all data? So in case there is a leak, it only attacks recent data and not all data. Hackers have a larger surface and a depth of health data and all type of data. So we have to, as for other types of data, we have to containerize. So this is a kind of the tower and the wall around the castle kind of situation. And we can see more and more. So the 0-day and other aspects are very interesting for hackers. So we need to modify the archiving of health data to make it compliant with the Secnum cloud, with the most demanding reference when you use the cloud. And this is the question we're raising of hosting health data in general on Secnum cloud, which is not the case today. Today is 27,001 plus, so it's an extra consultant day. So it's not a sign of security, and I'm saying that as a personal and not as a member of CNIL, but the evolution of the reference for hosting health data, the way it is proposed to the Commission and the way it was proposed to us as part of SREN doesn't satisfy us, because we in the Commission today on the SREN text, and senators in France and are very interested in that. We cannot content ourselves with just hosting the health data, which has not evolved in cybersecurity for the past 5 years, has not evolved in terms of identification of access for the past 5 years. So it is our role to try and drive that. And then it doesn't work, then it is our role to tell the various stakeholders legally to have the national regulation or European regulation observed. And this is what happened with the decision of health data by Microsoft for EHDH. It was 18 months ago. There's another one last week. So I think that's going to last. It's also the Union or Data Privacy Framework, which makes it that it's not a question of not trusting the Americans. It's a question of how can we be sure of what is happening and the fact that data are not going elsewhere.
They'll trust us if we try to prevent these leaks, and if we put the highest level of security on this data, which is the most important for them. And I think that's what was said by Bertrand. The ultimate attribute, and that's why it's so dangerous, and we have to be very cautious, is the biometrics, because the Anglo-Saxon countries don't look at biometrics the same way we do. Here in Europe, we're doing testing that's quite in depth at airports and others because, and this is where it's very important because customers have a little bit more fluidity, so we need to have solutions that are more and more fluid, but quite often they're not compliant with the needs for identification. And we can see that biometrics is starting to arrive as a solution, and if we're not able to put barriers in place, it doesn't mean that the technology is not good or that we shouldn't use it, but that there are limits, and those limits need to be recognized. This is what the Act and the GO text, this is what the Council validated, so we can use intelligent smart cameras without necessarily using biometrics where it's not necessary, but we have certain uses that are perfectly legitimate, but they're for local use, and they're just in, for example, there's no exportation of data or information that might infringe on private rights, but we can see that the airline companies and the airports want to use these new technologies to make the flow of traffic more fluid. People get out of the airport, they get out of the through the customs and go out of the airport because everything becomes much more fluid because of these new biometrics technologies. But this is not the position of France or Europe at this point, but it's something that we're looking into. Yes, these are currently, these are subjects that are being looked at the National Assembly, subjects of reflection, and we're going to talk about that. There's a sort of rationalization of these different uses for these new technologies. We're going to look at that at the KYC ID forum as well, moving forward today and tomorrow. But really, it's a question of trust and confidence is really, and the acceptability. Really, it's a question of communicating to the customer, to the citizen, to see what's behind all of this, and so that they can see that this is something that's easy to use and simple, but could be compromising. And so it's very important to inform people to understand the full range of issues involved with these new technologies. There's a whole role of pedagogy, of teaching, of informing the citizenship, and it's a little bit what Guy was talking about at the beginning, talking about the importance of all these things that they're working on, and it's very much a subject of today. Yeah, the SREN is trying to set a specific framework on this subject. Now, the subject came notably through the subject of adult sites, pornography, etc., which is a subject that's there's a subject where a lot of people don't want to particularly be identified or make a statement on these positions. But the real issue is how can we position ourselves in terms of security and have an interaction where we limit to the information that is given to the sites. We don't want to give copies of ID cards, for example, to pornography sites. But we still need to find a solution that protects citizens when they find themselves on sites like this, or they want to enter sites, and so the general consensus is, once again, the question of the use of encryption. We've pushed for a protocol. We have a French term called Yaman, where we find all of the different international works that are being done to see how we can be identified without without the sites getting the information of who I am, even my age, for example. So how can the question have a guarantee that there are real proof behind the information that is being delivered, and how can this information be revoked? How can access to this information be revoked if there's any contention? And so this is the work that we have to focus on. Obviously, the source of proof is going to come from a system for digital identification. This could be banks, that could be or other systems where you can prove your majority to be able to use sites that are that require certain age limit, and we're looking at models that might not be what we see in the United States or in England, or the United Kingdom, but the European Commission is looking at a model where the citizen can manage their attributes and get access to various sites, rather than having a system where there's an intermediary or an intermediation system that where online access to sites is reserved to only legal adults, the people over 18 years old. And so these, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not being very clear here, but just to look at the points that you raised, I think the notion of, let's say, banking credit cards, we had a system of identification that we were able to explain to people 30 years ago. This is a card that allows access to money. We saw in America, for example, people use their cards all the time. There's a lot of theft, a lot of fraud. And so what we really have to be able to do is get people to understand how to use these systems. For example, you have a QR code, you have an app. It's important that people understand how to use this. For about 80–90% of people, work this way. But there's 10% of people who won't have access to the app and or to this technology. And so we have to think about how we deal with people like in that minority, but there's certain things that we will do for lots of activities online, and that we have to sort of like become accustomed to it and come up with a model that works. And now you're with Apnil. You're working on these different themes. Where's the technology today? Is it ready? Does it exist already? Yes. And just to get back to the question of data that might be illicit, like pornography and things like that, I got to tell you, that's something that we not really focus on from the outcome study. We realize that there is a responsibility that has to be quite strong to propose solutions, and at the same time we have to protect minors, so protecting internet surfers, and so there's a whole debate and whole technology that's quite fascinating and quite interesting because you have the internet navigators who can do what they want, as long as it's legal, of course, but we also have to protect our children on the internet. And so we put into place an MVP, a demonstrator that today is currently in production on 2 sites. One has content that's exclusive called MIME. It's relatively well known, to see how it works. And so technologically it does work. We can see today that we can verify the identity of users. We don't keep the information. The information is immediately, once it's used for identification, it's immediately dispatched and or tossed out. And so the person can access the site anonymously, but we do have safeguards and barriers. It's kind of like an airlock, if you will, like TransConnect. These are sort of airlocks that allow you to, or gates, if you will, that make sure that you cannot get you can get in, but and through identification, but it does prevent. It's sort of a Chinese wall that prevents the sites from going all the way down to drilling down to the identification of the actual user. I might sort of break the ambiance. I got to tell you, I love technology. I love technological solutions, and so when it's possible, I love to do it. But it's not going to resolve all the problems. It's not going to resolve the problems that a lot of pornography goes through WhatsApp or Telegram, Instagram, and other things like that. And we also have VPNs, and quite often in other countries you have regulation. It's not the kind of regulations that we would like. And so really the real issue is education. We have to educate the user. And what we're going to put into place might sort of slow down some of these problems, maybe for France and for some, maybe for Europe, but it's not going to really get rid of the entire problem. And so we have to have a sort of sense of digital hygiene, and we have to educate people, make sure that people change their passwords regularly and don't put 1234 or admin. We've been saying it for years, but I got to tell you, people still do it. When you have a bizarre email, you don't open it, you don't click on the links if there's any question, but you can see, like, most attacks are done this way, very simple, and you can see that it works, so that's why they do it. So it's very important to raise awareness. We have to put into place these tools, but then we also have to assist the users in using these tools and educate them. And I think the big challenge for the years to come is how do we go from things that we've completely forgotten in terms of education and information to something that works technologically, but that people get used but have the good reflexes when they use. And that's, I think, a technology, that's not the problem. I mean, we're going to have technology. It's going to come in here. But the question is, how do we break it down? How do we break down the internet and prevent that Thai sites or sites in North Korea can use these sites to get information? I got to tell you, this is not issues that are ever going to change. We're going to constantly have to fight these problems, and education is the real key. And I think you shouldn't focus too much on the technological aspects. You should really look at the general public. That's where the solutions lie. So this is something that artificial intelligence is going to develop further and further. These are going to be tools that for most populations are going to be used. When I see somebody by video conference, for example, I imagine the person is real in front of their camera, but that's no longer the case. You now have video generators that are unbelievable. You can really, you have a journalist, for example, that was able to trick their parents and their bankers and in fact, it was not her; it was artificial intelligence image of the person, and so it was a way of tricking even her own parents and her bankers. So this is. We have technologies replacing human beings because we're now starting to have technological solutions and regulations that are continuing to move forward. And we have to continue to help people understand these technological changes, and we have to assist users in developing the proper approach, the proper digital hygiene, if you will, because all of us have our smartphones in our hands, but we don't really take the time to explain to people how to use these tools. We give it to our kids. We don't tell them how to use it. And so things become a little bit more complicated. And so there's a real role on accompanying the users at all levels. And so maybe let's talk a little bit more about Europe now. And let's talk about this notion of digital wallets. And you have the framework of digital identification, this European digital identification. This is a whole project that's underway, and we'll talk about this more and more today. But so the Commission has voted on it, and we can see that this is a real development that's coming online now. And you talked a little bit about it earlier, but maybe you can talk a little bit more. Thank you, Melanie. Yes, sure. Today we have done tests. We have the reference architecture, which came out today. We have the codes that are now available, which you can now see, everybody can look at. And from the French side, the industrial companies are working with the state, notably with France Identity, to be able to come up with the rollout of this digital wallet for 6 usage cases, for example, for teleservices, the opening of bank accounts, digital signatures for a loan, for example, access to health dossiers, purchase of SIM cards. And the idea is to see how this wallet can interact on particular usage cases, how you can transmit attributes for certain cases. So we're starting to work on that, and the deployment, unfortunately, is a little bit delayed. But we have a consortium involving 18 countries, so we have about 50 or so industrial companies involved in this. So corporations that are working on these issues, and so we're working with numerous European countries and trying to work on issues of interoperability, because that's what the experts are trying to do, and we hope we're able to do this with our European neighbors. Now, in your roadmap, do you have any milestones or expected by the end of the year, or anything notably on these 6 usage cases that you were talking about? Is there anything that is priorities? I think France Identity will make that declaration. We're working on it right now, but we're starting to do real-time testing, real testing that's being put into place for BConnect, Pierre, and the European level, and this interoperability that the Candice is talking about. How do you see it? How do you today we're looking at the national dimension, strictly national dimension. Our objective is to offer a mass market solution to all French inhabitants, and it's important that all French inhabitants have access to a solution. They should all have a BConnect account. Banks, there are banks that are shareholders, but we also have partner banks as well that will all be able to use the BConnect app. And so for the customers who don't have that mobile app, who don't have the mobile app, because there are certain customers that don't have a banking app, this will allow us to set up some form of identification system with a dedicated application that can be downloaded. So BConnect will be available to everyone. And so the idea is that millions or, excuse me, thousands or tens of thousands of service providers can use this BConnect platform because when you're trying to be inclusive in terms of services, it's important that you have an onboarding process that's totally automated that allows you to manage huge volumes of users and service providers. And what Peter was saying earlier was this notion is that people have to have numerous different types of profiles, depending on the types of services you're looking for. You might not necessarily want to give all your identification information. So this notion also of multi-profiles is very important. So that depending on the type of information that you need to give to the site, that you're not giving all your information to everybody all the time. So these are subjects that are very important. We have to adapt to the reality of the expectations and needs of our citizens, and some of them are very sensitive to this notion of keeping their their ability to remain as anonymous as possible. Maybe we can take some questions from the room. I'll pass around the microphone if there's any people in the room that have a question they'd like to ask. Hello, Nathalie Laguerre. I'm from Prestata. My question is to Mr. Laton. Sorry about that. I heard you talk about that digital identity has a conflict with the Regalian vision in France and the vision of EDAS based on technologies, which we call sort of the Anglo-Saxon technologies here. So I was a little bit surprised by what you said, because even France Connect is based on a pan-ID protocol, which is not French. The national identity card, the smart cards, which you will with a chip on them, are based on protocols that are based on OpenID Connect. This is not really French technology. But today you talked about the education of the general public, mass education. Is it not urgent to educate also our parliamentarians and our decision makers who really are seeing an absolute disruption between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0? There's a real huge evolution of the new technologies through open source technologies, which are not just Anglo-Saxon, but we're moving towards transitive trust solutions. And today, this just to the OG PRD and the ACNIL, we have crypto asymmetric cryptographed encrypted cartographies, which we talked about at the beginning of the Guy talked about at the beginning of the conference. We really need to come up with a sort of identity solution, which we sort of call a knowledge pool, which we have to make sure that we prevent linkability, all the while gathering all the necessary data. So should we not have a sort of kind of like Minitel like we have in France, we had in France originally, and it's important that we inform our decision makers, our authorities, our parliamentarians, because it's true, we have Microsoft, we have Google, we have all the big Anglo-Saxon companies that have their solutions. They're going to impose their solutions. We've seen them, their announcements, and here in Europe, if we don't do anything, we're going to be eaten alive. So is France going to be eaten alive? And is France ready to develop new technologies? Yesterday at the University of Leeds, we had people who said we have the technology here in France. We have real expertise here in France. Are we going to promote it? Thank you, Philippe. Do you have an answer? Yes. The question is, are the parliamentarians sufficiently aware of the changes and the technological culture? The answer to that, of course, is no. Most of the parliamentarians don't come from this domain, and I got to tell you, everything that you said, if I was a specialist, I could talk about it for hours and hours. But if I say that to Madame Michaud, the person responsible for these issues, unfortunately, they are not these people are not technologically savvy like the experts are. And this is our role as the specialists have to give that information to the parliamentarians, and then the parliamentarians have to basically do their job of voting the laws into place. But everybody has to do their job. And so the question, when you look at a law or regulations, are they compliant with our constitutions? Are they compliant with European law? Are they compliant with the directives? We have to constantly play this balance. And what the ACNIL does, and what we do in the different territories, quite unfortunately, a lot of these authorities are very far removed from these technological issues. They sometimes don't even have computers in all their services. So it's very important that we break this down for them, and so a lot of people don't know how to change a password. They don't know how to get rid of bugs, in a system, and we have a real fear. And it's a fear for them, is that they become a second-class citizen because they're not able to keep up with the technological advances. They don't have the latest smartphones, so we have that real concern of a double class of citizens: some who are like technologically savvy, and those who are technologically ignorant. And so. Now, you might say it's better in certain countries. Is it worse in other countries? I mean, we really have to develop a sort of common culture and really create a connection with technology, but not make technology the alpha and the omega of all the problems and all the solutions. First, it goes through education. First, it goes through schools. It goes through a certain number of things that are not technological. Now, that means that in the schools, we have to teach our children what an algorithm is and how it works. They have to know how to code, what a code is. The citizens of the future really have to know why we choose one technology over another for their good, because as a general rule, we're not doing this. So we have to talk about the world that they're growing into and how they can become actors in this new future. Yeah, I come from Nets. I created digital identity in Denmark, and we've worked on a number of these technologies. And the success that we had is that we had a link between the private and public sector, and we have 99% of the country uses digital identification. And so my question is, you have BConnect and DT04, you have two solutions that are separate. And my question is, how are you going to do if there's a harmonization between public and private sector? What we saw in Nordic is that the government, as Denmark has done, those who want to possess digital identification, Norway is going to do the same thing because they want to prepare for the ESD 2.0 wallet, and said, if you work together, have you worked with DT04, or did you do a sort of orchestration layout where you can use either BConnect or DT04, or from DT04 you can use a separate digital identification or use BConnect? Did you work together? Did you work separately? How did you do it? Our choice was to have a solution dedicated to the private sector. You're absolutely right. The Scandinavians have a solution that's both public and private. We made the choice, and we thought about this for a long time, is to just focus on the private sector, because today you have France Connect, you have all kinds of solutions behind France Connect. There's very strong regulations governing France Connect, and so we made the choice that's totally lucid around the private sector. We focus on the private sector, and there's obviously business reasons for that, economic reasons. When you provide digital identification, you need to have a financial balance, and that goes through making the right choices. And I say it's the reuse of a huge infrastructure that's compliant with the DSP2 framework, and so the idea is to be compliant with DSP2, that doesn't mean that we're not going to work with our friends at DT04 or other solutions, but today we have created our own framework. I think there's one other question from the back of the room. If we can give the microphone. Thank you. Hello, Anton Malois, founder of Opal. My question is also to Mr. Chassineux on the business model. Did you make this choice to connect the users' usage of bconnect and track the behavior of the users throughout their usage of bconnect? We are very conscious of the need for the protection of private information. I'm sure you're not surprised by that, but it's a major, major concern. And that answers your question. bconnect is not there to sell information to a certain number of actors that would be interested to know where our users navigate. Our objective is not to tell people what the French users do when they're on the internet. Our choice was to be totally compliant with the GPD, which is the privacy laws here in France and in Europe, to have a sort of like trust, a confidence cloud, if you will. We do B2C as well, which is also based in this trust cloud, where we promise the minimization of the use of data, the protection of private data, the limitation of what data would be transferred. It's not part of our business model. It's not at all based on the sale of private data or any data. It's very simple. When you have reinforced security and fluid navigation, you have 2 points of benefit. You facilitate the use of the creation of a clientele, because when you create a customer, you don't have to re-enter the information or re-enter a password. You have the acquisition of your customers, your clientele. It's very easy. Another, you have a greater transformation rate, because when things are fluid throughout the payment trajectory, when the experience of shopping goes, straight to the purchasing, and all of this is very fluid. Our business model is very simple. It's based on very reasonable transformation rates, and the cost of the bconnect service must be compensated by the increase in the net results based on this rise in the transformation rate. So we have a real business model, real business case. And the 5 big banking groups that launched bconnect, obviously I had to present a business proposition, as we call it, and we had to make choices that were acceptable by the different actors to put into place this bconnect button. So our business model is not at all based on the sale of data to other actors, as other companies do. Okay, thank you for that answer and your transparency, Pierre. Unfortunately, we don't have much more time, but I would like our guests to stay with us, because I know that there's other questions, so don't hesitate to come up to the presenters here on the stage after this conference. But we're now going to talk a little bit more about these advances in technology. Obviously, there has to be developments in terms of laws and regulations and the raising of awareness and education of users with all these new uses that are coming online, not just in France, but in Europe. And when you look at the people who are farther removed from all these digital technologies, to be able to include them in this whole trajectory and to create a hybrid system, and to include them in this whole environment of the digital world, and everybody has to be able to access these different advances, to be able to promise more to the customer with simplified and optimized and secure trajectories. And here you can really see that data is really very important, and this is to everybody, and it's very dear and dear to us all. And once again, to get back to this notion of the human being, it's to put the human being at the center of all of these activities. Maybe that's the key to the future. And there's a lot of subjects for the future in 2025, 2026, where we're really going to celebrate these 5 years. And this is something we talked about in the introduction. We're going to talk about the 10 years of the ID&KYC Forum. I think it's a really promising future with all of the work that we're doing here today, and it's been presented to you. It's been a real pleasure to be with you here this morning. Thank you for your attention, your trust, your faithfulness. And as you said, as Guy said, the agenda today is going to be very, very rich. We're going to talk about the digital identification framework in Europe. There's a lot of debate on this subject. It'll be very fascinating, and so I hope to see you again. over the next 3 days, and I'll be back here this afternoon to continue with all of these subjects. Thank you to all, and thank you to our guests.